Hello, hello, hello. I hope you've had a great weekend and you're super excited and looking forward to an excellent week. I'm really excited because today we're going to be talking about the importance of being adaptable. The topic for this week on the aha moments will be adaptability, and I think you guys are going to see why having this as a skill is really, really important. So let's get into it. Welcome back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I want to talk to you about how being adaptable has been a huge part of my life. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. I was born on the west side of Chicago, and I went to school in a black neighborhood. I lived around black families and my family, like my extended family. And then when I was about 4 years old, we moved to Massachusetts. And it was a huge shock to my system to all of a sudden be surrounded by a brand new culture. I was literally the only only black kid in the class full of white kids. And it was a huge shock to me, massive. And I realized that no matter what, even as a young 5-year-old in the first grade, I realized that this is something I'm going to have to overcome. I'm going to have to figure out how to succeed in this brand new environment, even though it was difficult and scary. It took everything in me to be able to do that. That was the first time I can remember having to depend upon the skill of being adaptable, but it certainly was not the last. I remember going to college believing that I was going to be a marine biologist, and that was my major. And I took a class called psychology. And I remember being really excited to study sleep. People often ask me what was the first thing that I fell in love with in psychology. It was actually what the brain does during sleep. I took just an intro to psych class as a freshman in college, and I just loved this idea of what the brain was doing during sleep. It was just so fascinating. And I asked the professor, what do you do with a degree in psychology? And I remember her saying, not much. If you get a degree in psychology, you're going to need a graduate degree. And I said, what kind of graduate degree? And she said something in the helping professions, like a social work degree or a counseling degree or a marriage and family therapy degree. And I remember thinking, like, oh my gosh, I could spend my whole career helping people if I get one of these degrees. And I had to be adaptable again, and I had to change. Now, I remember in college being told if you transfer, you're going to lose certain credits. It's going to take you longer to graduate. It's going to cost you a bit more money. And all of that was really bad news. And I remember hearing that and thinking, like, I don't want to deal with all those things, but I don't want to live a life that is unfulfilled. That was actually a bigger driver to me. I don't want to live a life where I'm unsatisfied. So I would rather take a little bit longer to graduate from college. I'd rather spend a little bit more time in graduate school or in class. I'd rather spend a little bit more money. But if the payoff is going to be I get to do a career that I'm super duper excited about, then it's worth it to me. You know, I wish I could tell you the world is going to stay the same, but it isn't. I mean, if you look around, think about how different things are now than they were 3 years ago. And when you have rigid thinking, you can't flow and adjust with the times. I was teaching a group of psychotherapists how to be successful in private practice probably 10 or 12 years ago. And there was a guy in the group who said he would never take credit cards. And I asked him why not. And he said, because if people see on their credit card bill that they've come to see me 4 times in a month and that costs them $450, he was afraid that they would say, oh my gosh, that's a huge expense, and then they would cancel his service. And I said to him, but credit cards, I mean, nobody uses cash or checks anymore. It's, 10, 12, whatever, however many years ago. And he said he stuck to it. He said he still wouldn't do it. Well, a few years ago, I tried to look that guy up, and he's gone out of business because rigid thinking is limiting. Imagine if you were somebody, and regardless of what field, and 5 years ago you said, I will never do my services via video. And then COVID happened, and everyone, education, psychotherapy, medical, legal, we all had to figure out a way to do our jobs via Zoom, do our jobs via video conferencing. So be adaptable, be flexible, even if it's only because the world around you is not staying the same. So it's requiring you to have the ability to adjust as a skill set. So I want you to think about that and just look around you and realize life is not staying the same. So look back on your history and see times when you've adjusted your thinking, your actions, and the way that you moved. Thank you again for being here. I really, really appreciate it. Please keep sharing this podcast. Help me reach more people. It means the world to me. And don't forget to subscribe. You can do that wherever it is you enjoy listening to podcasts, Apple, Simplecast, Spotify, wherever it is. And don't forget to support me on Patreon. You can get bonus episodes and PDF downloads. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
As you can probably tell from my voice, I'm playing injured today. The worst nightmare for any podcaster or content creator is to have a cold and something wrong with your voice, and that is where I am now. I do not have COVID. I tested myself, but I'm not going to let that stop me from talking to you about the importance of adaptability, because I'm currently on a trip where being adaptable was a huge part of the trip and enriched the experience. And I want to share that with you here today. Welcome back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. You know, sometimes we get stuck in our own habits and patterns. Growing up, I was someone that when I would go to a restaurant like Applebee's, I would order the exact same thing. Like when I was a kid and had the extra special opportunity to go eat at a restaurant, which was not common, I would go to Applebee's and I would order chicken fingers with extra honey mustard and French fries. That was my habitual order. That is not a healthy meal, and eventually I gained a whole bunch of weight, and I wanted to lose weight. And I started varying my diet and started realizing that there's a lot of really delicious things that I was not availing myself to because I was ordering the same thing every time. Well, that kind of happened this past week. I was on a trip to Durango, Colorado, and I drove from Texas to Durango, Colorado. While in Durango, my next bit of work I had to do was in LA. I was done with my work in Durango on Sunday morning, and I didn't have another meeting in LA until Tuesday afternoon. So I decided to kind of cancel my flights and investigate how long would it take to drive from Durango, California to LA. And it turns out it would be about the same length of time to drive to Texas, where I had flights. So I canceled those flights and decided to drive to California. It significantly enriched the experience. On this drive, we stopped at the Grand Canyon, which is kind of a bucket list thing. I'd never seen the Grand Canyon before and had always wanted to. And tonight, I finally got to do that. I got to see the Grand Canyon, and it was magnificent. I mean, it was special beyond special. And we took pictures and we created content. Then we stopped at the Hoover Dam, which is also just this ridiculous mountain of engineering. It was awe-inspiring, like something that big, that powerful, that important. I mean, the Hoover Dam is responsible for like all of the power west of the Mississippi River, right? All because I was adaptable and had flexible thinking in relationship to this trip. And I think we have to remember that sometimes our own rigidity gets in the way of our ability to have an enriched experience. As I make this recording right now, I'm in Las Vegas. And as soon as I'm done recording, I've been sleeping literally all day trying to recover from this illness because I got some really important stuff to do in the next coming days. But I'm going to go out on Las Vegas Boulevard and kind of enjoy whatever it is Las Vegas has to. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to enjoy whatever it is Las Vegas has to offer. I'm going to enjoy food. I might go take in a show. I might find something to do that I couldn't otherwise do because it's a wonderful opportunity that I wouldn't have had unless I had decided to adjust my plans. I have a lot of people in my life that they actually get anxious when you adjust the plans on the fly. Like it actually produces a high level of anxiety. And I think being able to adjust on the fly is one of the greatest strengths because the world is often not static. The world is often unstable. The world constantly shifts and moves. I think it's really, really important that we stay flexible, that we stay adaptable. It is one of the best ways to enrich our lives and enrich our experiences. So look for opportunities to be flexible. Look for opportunities to be adaptable. So then when something is forced upon you, like the COVID shutdown, for example, you'll be able to handle it well and maybe even create an opportunity to enrich your life. Hey, thank you so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate all of the support. So please keep sharing this podcast with your friends and family on social media. It means the world to me. And don't forget to subscribe. You can do that on Apple Podcasts. You can do that on Spotify, Simplecast, Google Podcasts, wherever it is you enjoy listening to podcasts. And don't forget to support the podcast on Patreon, where there's some really cool bonuses. Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow.
So I'm still playing a little injured. You can probably hear my voice. I'm still a little under the weather. Better than yesterday, but still a little under the weather, which again is not a great thing for a podcaster. But we're going to keep it going and continue our conversation about adaptation. And we're going to talk about how to know when it's appropriate to be adaptable and when it's appropriate to stick to your guns, when it's appropriate to stand your ground, when it's appropriate to not change. So welcome back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I want to talk to you about, how do you know when you should not adapt? So there are two things that I want you focused on when it comes to being adaptable. It's really important that you are adaptable and that you're flexible. You got to be able to perform the tasks of your job or do the things you need to do, whether it's optimal or less than optimal. You have to be able to get things done. However, there are two variables I want you to focus on and how to let you know when you should focus on being yourself and being more rigid. The first one is if something violates your morals or your ethics or the standards you want to live your life by. So I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in college, early in college, I had a crush on this girl. I didn't have any money, so I called this flower shop. And asked how much it cost to deliver flowers. And they said $30, whatever it was, but I didn't have the $30. And I didn't know when I could get the $30. And the owner of the flower shop said, "We'll go ahead and deliver the flowers if you promise to mail us a check." And I was like, this is an opportunity for me to get the thing that I want. But because I couldn't figure out when I would be in a position to send the $30, I had to turn it down, because to accept that would have been a violation of who I want to be as a person. And it was important to me. It was important to me to stick to those principles. So always, always, always be the person that you want to be. And if something comes up that moves you further away from being the person you want to be, then you have to say no and you have to turn it down. So that's thing number one, whenever something violates your morals or your ethics. The second thing is when being adaptable causes you personal harm. So here's another example. When I came into the field of psychotherapy and I would go to conferences and lecture, I would often wear clothes I was not comfortable with. I would often wear clothes I was not comfortable in, like slacks and a button-down shirt. And there's nothing wrong with those things. It's just not me. And over the years, I've learned that I'm a better version of myself when I show up as myself. So I am someone who's more comfortable in a t-shirt and in a hoodie than I am in anything else. So it became important to me that I value my mental health enough to show up as myself. And I realize that to show up as not myself causes me harm, does me a disservice. So I try really hard to only show up in venues as myself and to only show up as myself. And that's good for me, and it's good for you too. So those are the two variables. If being adaptable violates your principles and your morals, or if being adaptable causes you some level of harm, don't do it. Stick to your principles, stick to your values, and stick to your morals. And by the way, these things are really, really important in my current life, as I'm spending a lot of time out in LA working on a few projects, and you'd be shocked at how many times you're put in a position where your values, morals, and ethics are tested. And I always want you guys to be ready for the test. So you got to be adaptable, but you also have to be principled and know when to be which. So I want you to think about a time when you had to choose between being principled or being adaptable. What choice did you make, and how did it work out for you? Thank you for being here today. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for listening and supporting this podcast by sharing this on your social media and with your friends. Please continue to do that. Also, subscribe. You can do that wherever you listen to your podcast, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Simplecast, Spotify, wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts. And keep supporting me on Patreon, where you get bonus content and bonus material. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. So we're going on day 3 with me being a bit under the weather. If I'm being honest, maybe even more than a bit, which is super annoying when you create content and podcasts for a living. But this is a really important project. It's a really important podcast, so I'm going to carry on and keep going with our discussion about being adaptable. And today I'm going to show you 3 things that you can do to help yourself be more adaptable and be more flexible in your life. Welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and so let's get into adaptability. So there's 3 things that I want to share with you that you can do to increase your ability to be adaptable. One of the things I hear people say, I hear it in my therapy practice, I hear it in my personal life, I literally hear it all the time, when people say that they don't like change. But what we don't realize is the other side of that coin is kind of like this selfish desire for you to be comfortable. So the first thing I want you to do is practice the art of being uncomfortable. I remember when I first got married, I always sleep on the left side of the bed. And I remember when I first got married, my wife said, "How about you sleep on the right side of the bed?" And I was like, "No, I want to sleep in my routine." In hindsight, when you have opportunities like that, allow yourself to be uncomfortable for a minute and sleep on the right side of the bed, or sit in a different place in your house, or sit at a different place at the dinner table. Like, it's really important that you take opportunities to be a bit uncomfortable, especially if it's going to allow someone else to be more comfortable. The second thing that I want to challenge you to do is oftentimes between your goal and achieving that outcome, the space in the middle is uncomfortability. Like, I have a friend who wants to be well known in the field of psychotherapy. She's got really great ideas. She's a very good teacher and lecturer of psychotherapy. She has wonderful, theoretical ideas that she could write in books and things. But in 2022, in order to achieve recognition in our field, you have to be able to publish, and you have to be able to publish on social media, and you've got to create video content and audio content similar to this podcast. And she does not want to do it. It makes her uncomfortable. She is not willing to be uncomfortable to achieve her aim. So she doesn't. And as a consequence, she's not getting the recognition that I think she deserves, given the quality of her teaching, her work, and her ideas. So think about that for a second. Oftentimes, between your goal and the achievement of the goal, the space in the middle requires some uncomfort. So I want you to focus on doing what's necessary to get what you want. Oftentimes, you have to do what is undesirable to have what is unimaginable. You have to do what you can't even imagine. You have to do what you don't want to do to have everything you want. I was watching a TV show about Navy SEALs. Navy SEALs are like the toughest dudes in the American military. And I shouldn't say dudes, actually, because they're male and female Navy SEALs. And they are really tough. They go through some of the toughest training ever. And one Navy SEAL said, "I'll go through a week of hell." The hardest part of their training is called Hell Week. And he said, "I'll go through a week of hell to live the rest of my life as a SEAL." So think about that for a moment. The second step is sometimes you have to be willing to do uncomfortable things to have your biggest dreams. And the third thing I want you to do when you think about being uncomfortable or being adaptable is oftentimes think about who you want to become. Because actually, the act of adaptability is about evolving and becoming who we want to become. And if we stay too rigid, we don't grow. So spend time thinking about who you want to be. I look around my life these days and I can't believe the situations and circumstances I find myself in. And I'm so pleased and so happy that I didn't get stuck in an old way of thinking, or in an old way of life, or in an old way of living. I was able to evolve and grow and become who I wanted to become. And I'm still becoming. It's not a journey that has ended. But think about who you want to become, because I'm not saying adaptability and flexibility are important just randomly. They're important because it helps us evolve and grow into the people that we want to become. And that, to me, is the biggest lesson here. So those are the 3 things, and I want you to bring those into your lives and make it a really big, important part of the way you live your life. So think about the different ways you can apply those 3 things in your life and watch your life soar. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your listening. I appreciate your support. I appreciate your love. Please keep sharing this on your social media and with people in your personal life. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Simplecast, Spotify, wherever it is you enjoy listening to podcasts. And don't forget to support me on Patreon where there's bonus material. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Happy Friday, everyone. I'm really excited, not just because it's Friday and we made it through another week, but I'm excited to talk to you about the one question I ask people who are really stuck in an idea and really stuck in a way of being and struggling to change and be flexible and be adaptable. I'm going to share with you the one question I ask them that helps them get moving and helps them decide to make changes in their lives. But first, let me welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and the most important question I ask people is about outcomes. And let me explain to you what I mean. We as human beings, we do a lot of stuff. Like the majority of what we do out of habit and out of comfort. The majority of what we do because this is the way we've always done things. And we don't realize that sometimes that gets us stuck in bad patterns. Sometimes that gets us stuck in unhealthy kind of rituals. And sometimes that gets us stuck in unproductive routines. The most important question I can ask you is, what are you trying to achieve? And I don't just mean like small things. I mean like big picture stuff. What are you trying to accomplish in your life? And what you usually find out is the life that people have built is not in line with what they're trying to achieve. So their patterns they're currently in that are built around comfort are not in line with helping them to achieve the things they're trying to achieve in their overall life. And my job is to help them to change that pattern. My job is to help them make different choices that are not based on comfort. And here's the bad news. Help them make choices that are not based on comfort. And here's the bad news. They're going to be a little bit more uncomfortable. That's just it. I mean, people tell me all the time, like, I want to be happy and I want to be healthier. I mean, that's probably the top two things people want in their lives. I want to be happier and I want to be healthier. And when I ask them about their daily lives, they're not doing anything to support happiness. They tell me things like, I love travel, but I never travel. They tell me things like, I want to be healthier, but I only really go to the gym. Unfortunately, if you love travel, you're probably going to have to get like a second job that would facilitate making more money so you can take your family on more trips. So you might have to work more hours so you can take a summer trip and a winter trip with your family. Or you might have to wake up earlier in the morning so you can go to the gym. Now, that's not a comfortable thing. I don't know anybody that enjoys waking up at 4 a.m. to get a workout in before they go to work. But that's what it takes when you make choices that are based upon the outcomes you want to achieve instead of your current level of comfort. I wish I could stress this more, but guys, we only have one life, right? We only have one trip, or that's it. That's all we got. And if you fill it being comfortable, that means you take no risks. And if you take no risks, you never really reach the apex of what you could be and what you could do. And that to me is sad. That to me is a waste. That to me is unfortunate. I want you to see who you can be. I want you to push the limits and boundaries of what you thought was possible. I want you to achieve the greatest of greatnesses. I want you to achieve the highest of heights. I want you to be everything that you could possibly be so that you can see what it's like. And it's going to take you making decisions that are in line with the outcomes you want to achieve. Your comfort level is about safety. It's about being normal. It's about, waking up every day and having a good day. But being flexible and taking chances and taking risks and being willing to be uncomfortable a bit, that's about thriving. That's about making the most of this life. That's about you being the very, very best version of you. And that's what I want you to be totally all in on. So I want to encourage you to be open to change, but not just any change, change that specifically is in line with the outcomes that you want to achieve. I want you to remember that being adaptable doesn't necessarily mean changing so you can be the person someone else wants you to be. It means changing so you can be the person you were meant to be. It means changing so you're not stuck in patterns. It means being open to solutions to problems that you are facing that you didn't understand before and how it might benefit you and your life going forward. Thank you so much for being here today. As usual, I super appreciate your support, and thank you for sharing this podcast. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Please keep doing that. You can also subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done so already on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Simplecast, wherever it is you enjoy listening to podcasts. And don't forget to support me on Patreon where there is bonus content for you. And I look forward to seeing you on Monday.